and welcome to part 2 of our finance episode. On the second part, we've got Rob Collins, who is Chief Finance Officer at Mersey NHS Foundation Trust.
Real. So my name's Rob Collins and I'm Chief Finance Officer, as Leslie Ann said, at Mersey NHS Foundation Trust. So I'm not too sure how much you know about the trust, but we provide community specialist inpatient and community mental health and physical health services to a population in the northwest of around 11 million people. And those services also include learning disabilities, addiction services and brain injury services.
Thank you for that, Rob. Could you just tell us then a little bit about, if I can take you back to your time when you were coming up to leaving school, could you tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you've got from there to where you are now?
Yeah, no problem at all. So I think you may see my career pathways maybe being a little bit different, a little bit out of the ordinary, but in reality, it's probably not unique at all. So I didn't go through a management trainee graduate program, and I didn't go to university. Instead, I chose to leave education when I was 18 after I got decent A-level results. And my first step into the jobs market was a 6-month fixed-term job with a local NHS trust on the Wirral. And that job involved me paying invoices for that local trust. And in that first 6 months, I'd probably say I enjoyed it. I thought this is a decent start. Didn't have much to base it on, but I enjoyed the people I worked with as well. Quite soon into it, I realised it was a decent career path in terms of the conversations that I'd had with people around me. So really good line manager that gave me a good insight into what was possible. And then probably slightly beyond that 6-month period, I then realised how much of a difference I could make, and I realised I could have an impact. I started to really understand what the NHS was about, but only a little bit, given it was only sort of 18, 19 years of age. So on the back of that 6-month fixed term period, it actually grew to what then became a 14-year employment with the same NHS trust. And in that 14 years, I guess outside of work, I got married, had 2 kids, bought a house, bought my first house. But in work, I just got really good opportunities for promotions. And it's one thing I would say is available for everybody. The opportunities are there within that NHS finance career. So when those opportunities came up, I was fortunate enough to be successful in securing promotions as I moved through my career pathway in the NHS. And in addition to the promotional activity, there was also really good training and education opportunities, some fantastic development opportunities. And it really is a tremendous place to be in an NHS finance environment when it comes to development and staff development. And during my period, I studied on the job, so at night school, so really tricky to juggle a 9 till 5 job and also go to college. But I progressed my association for accounting technicians, and then I became AAT qualified. And then subsequent to that, I then studied for my professionals. So I studied for the Chartered Institute for Management Accounts, and then I was successful in being qualified chartered accountant through that period when I was in that trust in the Wirral. On the back of that 14-year period, I then applied for a job in Liverpool with another NHS trust. So stayed with my career in the health service. And that role was actually Deputy Director of Finance. So it was my first sort of real senior Deputy Director role. So we did that in 2013. And then subsequent to that, during the last 18 years, during a number of different transitions and transactions within the trust, I found myself in Mersey in this Chief Finance Officer role. So it's a quick whistle stop tour. Hopefully it's useful in terms of insights in terms of my career so far.
Absolutely, it is, Rob. And if you can sort of take your memory back to school and pre those A levels and maybe even GCSEs, were you clear on your path, what it was going to look like? Did you have sort of teachers who inspired you to sort of be where you are today?
It's a really interesting question, because probably I'm looking at my son now. So my eldest son's 14, and I'm having sort of consistent thoughts in terms of where's his thinking at. What's he thinking about? Is he thinking about a career? And when I ask him anything about it, he probably looks at me a bit cross-eyed to start with, thinking, "Dad, I'm 14. I'm still in school." And I think about back to me when I was that age, and he asked me the question, "What did I want to be?" And I want to be a maths teacher. I want to be a PE teacher with maths as my second subject.
Right.
And we started, so it was in the mid-90s, back end of the 90s, you started to get a bit more careers advice. You started to get your career advisor turning up in college. And the conversation I had, and I always remember, never remember a name, but I can remember exactly what she looked like. And she said to me, "Have you heard about AAT?" or being an accountant technician, and I had no idea at all. So no family history of being an accountant.
Wow.
I had no idea what she was talking about. But she must have pricked something in my mind, because it was something then that I probably hung on to when I went through business studies A levels and chose to do business studies, and I chose to do maths as well. So there was something always rumbling along there, but I would never say it was definitely something I was definitely going to do. And what actually made me make my first move, you talk about sort of sliding doors and opportunities arising, was a conversation I had with a friend I played football with, and he was an accountant. And he introduced me to this 6-month fixed term role that I applied for as my first step into the jobs market. And I don't know what happens in there, but something then comes together and you start to realise it's an opportunity for you.
Brilliant. And it is, isn't it? You know, a lot of our opportunities or sort of information comes from our networks or our social circle. But in addition to that, you know, every young person has that careers advisor in school now, has that person who can have that conversation. And it's like you say, even if it's just a hint of a possibility, you've then sort of recognised that 4 years on and have picked up on that little bit of advice and gone down that road, which is really good.
Absolutely.
Fab. And just finally, before we let you go, obviously you've touched on the fact that you're Chief Finance Officer, which sounds really important. Sounds very, very like a lot of responsibility. So could you tell us a little bit about just what that entails on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, definitely no problem at all. It's a funny question, because it does focus your mind. What do we do when I come into work every day? And I think that the first responsibility I've got is to ensure that every pound that comes into the trust, so every pound that lands in the trust to be spent, is spent effectively. So we need to work with the teams across the trust to make sure they understand what's available, and then to make sure they use it in the most appropriate way. And also a big responsibility to make sure it's used efficiently. So when we talk about efficiency, we're talking about making sure it's spent in a cost-effective way. You know, we spend it in the right way and get the right value attached to that pound that comes into the trust. But in addition to that, there's also a role in terms of maximising the investment opportunity. So making sure we can maximise the amount of money available. And I do that because it makes sure that our services and our doctors, our nurses and our other clinical staff, it makes sure that they have the resource that they need to make sure that they improve the things that we do as the NHS for the patients that we support and the service users that we support. So I'd say that's really, really important piece of the role. In addition to that, though, I've also got a responsibility for managing the procurement team. So our procurement team will work on purchasing of all the goods and services, all the equipment that our clinicians need to make sure we can deliver quality services. So our purchasing procurement team have a really big responsibility in making sure the right goods are purchased, but also for the right cost. So really big responsibility across that procurement team. And then finally, probably a point to probably talk back to my own opportunities during my career is a big one around staff development. So I've got a huge responsibility that I take extremely seriously to make sure that the staff in our finance and procurement team and across the trust as a whole have the same sort of opportunities, at least, that I had when I came through my career. So we talked just about the careers advisor, but really that career advisor role doesn't ever go away when you move into work. And your line manager, your supervisor, you should always maintain that career advisor type responsibility, albeit it's in a work environment as opposed to a school or college environment. So that's it probably in a nutshell, I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. So thank you to Rob. Hope students you found that interesting. You can sort of match that all up with the talks that we've heard from Michael and Nikki today, and hopefully he's given you a really good insight into that sector within Mersey Care.